Dearest guest, the kettle's on and the moon's just right, and I would love for you to join me for a witch's tea party. November in the Mystery Journal is all about steaming cups of creativity, a dash of whimsy, and some soft and colourful November magic. Hi, I'm Erin, and I've been waiting for you. Would you like to pull up a chair? This beautiful journal right here was actually the prize for a giveaway on my channel almost 6 months ago. But it wasn't just a blank journal. I'd actually gone all the way through this journal and set it up for 6 months worth of bullet journal themes, all themed around something magical. November's theme started mostly as a colour scheme, but the more I looked at my stationery, the more myself and my channel members who helped me plan all the themes for this journal realised that the sum of all of these pink and purple and blue parts actually added up to a very witchy tea party. Since this journal left my care and went to its new home all the way back in June, obviously I never actually used this theme, but I'm hoping that for the winner, using these pages every day in November will feel a little bit like living inside a paranormal romance book. As always, there are links to all of the stationery I'm using for this theme in the description, as long as they can be linked to. It was a while ago that I actually set this up, so sometimes things go in and out of stock in that time, but I'll do my best to link you to everything I possibly can. The blue and white washi tape with the teacups and teapots on it is from Cora Crea Crafts. The incredibly magical teacup that's going to be the focal point of the cover page on the left there is from the Quirky Cup Collective. We'll be using some sticker sheets from Sticky featuring artwork by Marigona Suli and November Rush, and the bejewelled branches and the glitter textured washi sheets are from JOURNALSAY. Not quite 1 year ago, I started learning italic calligraphy, which is a beautiful historical calligraphy style that uses a broad edge pen. So what you usually see called a calligraphy pen, where it has kind of a flat surface, that's what we need for italic calligraphy. And I'm kind of using this setup just as a chance to practice. Given that I actually put these pages together back in late May, early June, I think my italic calligraphy has improved quite a bit since then. So it's a little bit rough to watch this happen because some of my angles are inconsistent across the word, but I think the overall effect is pretty cute and there's nothing I can do about it now, so it is what it is. Also, the size of your lettering is dictated by the size of the broad nib that you use for your italic calligraphy, and I don't have that many broad nib pens, so we're ending up with some pretty big and bold lettering in this theme just out of necessity. These very cosmic looking bottles on PET tape have appeared on my channel a few times before. I got them from London Gifties, and when you buy a PET tape roll from London Gifties, my goodness, they give you so much on the roll, you'll be using that thing until you are old and grey. This beautiful pink bookshelf washi tape is from Bloomsicle Paper Co., an Australian brand. It is absolutely gorgeous, and she does release one of these with most of her collections, so you might not be able to get it in exactly this colour, but they will have probably something similar. My vision for this theme is that you're drinking your tea with a bunch of other adorable witches in your cute outfits and your pointy hats, maybe in the home cottage of one of the witches in this coven, or maybe you're in a beautiful magical cafe that one of them runs. Usually when I make a theme that I want to feel witchy, I go for dark colours and lots of contrast and lots of metallics, but this time I wanted to see if I could make something pastel that still felt kind of magical, but also very sweet. A lot of this theme was trial and error. As you can see, I've been doing quite a bit of peeling things back up and sticking them down and moving them around, especially here on this cover spread, because this one is one I always want to make a pretty big impact. If you like the idea of the mystery journal, as in a journal that I have set up from start to finish to cover 6 months of the year that you can use for your very own, I will be opening up a giveaway for the next mystery journal, which will cover from January through to June of 2026 in the beginning of November. It won't be magically themed like this journal, it will have a different theme that runs all the way through. And the only way to enter the giveaway is on the new journal setup video for that journal. So you'll have to keep your eyes peeled, make sure you're subscribed if you're not already, and you can even turn on notifications if you are a super keen bean. Since I am using so much of this theme as my calligraphy practice opportunity, I thought it might be fun to include a quote page on the right side here opposite the cover page. So naturally, I've gone for a quote about witches and tea. Since there are some limitations around the size of the writing I can do with this kind of pen, I thought it would be best to go for a kind of a hybrid approach here. So part stamping, so I could have the less important words of the quote be a little bit smaller, and just really highlight the bigger ones with the calligraphy. I'm not too sure what the source of this quote is originally. I found it just kind of kicking around online, lots of Pinterest items with this quote on it, so no attribution for this quote unfortunately. If you do know where it comes from, please do let me know. It reads, "Gather we witches young and old for a cup of tea and a story to be told." And I just think that is so perfect, partly because it sounds like the first lines to a fairy tale, which is ideal for this journal, but also because it can kind of function as an invitation to the tea party, and that just makes me so happy. If only this were a real tea party, I would love to be in attendance. Now that the lettering is done for the quote page, I know how much room I have left over for decoration, so I'm going to jump back in and add some shiny things, some crystals, and some hanging lights from branches. Something that I was really proud of when it came to this particular mystery journal is that I didn't buy any new stationery or even reach out to any of the brands that I sometimes work with to source new stationery for this journal. Absolutely everything I used in it came from my existing stationery stash, so it was fantastic to use up some things I'd had in my collection for a while that maybe weren't the perfect fit for my own journaling style, or I just hadn't found the right place to use them yet. But really what I like to think is that they all wanted to be together on these pages and they were just waiting for me to realize it. These tiny sparkle stickers also came from a sticky sticker sheet, although I couldn't tell you which one, I don't remember. When I finished up the rest of the stickers on the sheet, I just transferred all of these tiny sparkles into my reusable sticker book, and they were also waiting for this opportune moment too. I do remember where these little purple stars are from though. Those are from Lace & Whimsy Studio, and they come as little extras on so many of their sticker sheets. Moving on to our second spread now, this is the calendar spread, and that always makes the most sense to me as the second spread in a setup, immediately following any kind of cover and quote situation. I was really lucky to be working with several washi tapes in this setup that all are horizontally oriented, which meant I could kind of just stack them next to each other and they would immediately make any page look beautifully decorated and thought out, which is so helpful. This adorable little blue teapot tape is also from Bloomsicle Paper Co. It actually came in the same set as the bookshelf washi underneath it. I think it was the Duchess set. So that explains why they look completely spectacular next to each other. They were intended to be used that way. Oh, I didn't even tell you about the journal we're using. It's from TIEFOSSI. It's the Moonlight Melody journal in the dark blue colorway. It is absolutely gorgeous. The cover looks like a fairy tale book anyway, which is kind of what inspired the idea for the theme. And it's A5 sized, which I find is the most accessible journal size. It's definitely the easiest to come across. It's fairly portable and you can fit quite a bit in it, especially with the TIEFOSSI journals because they tend to have more pages than your standard journals. I wanted to mention that it's an A5 journal because then it will help you to understand the scale of the pages. So the calendar I've put down here has boxes that are 4 dot grid spaces tall by 4 dot grid spaces wide, and I've added 1 dot grid space in between each one so that they kind of look like they're magically floating. I wonder why. I'm actually breaking the rules a little bit for the initial for the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday along the top of the calendar because I'm making them smaller than they technically should be with this size nib, but I think it's fine. I actually think they turned out kind of cute, although the Monday is leaning on an angle and the rest of them are straight up and down. We'll just pretend they're not like that and it's fine. The tiny fine liner I'm using here to add the numbers is the Sakura Pigma Micron 01. It is my absolute favorite kind of fine liner because they are waterproof, so even if you color over them with other markers or watercolor paint, if you really want to be adventurous, they won't smudge and smear. I used a bigger one of those same pens, the 08 size, for the calendar boxes, and I just freehanded those. I thought the witches are going to be very organic about the way they approach their recipes and brew their teas, so I'm going to be very organic about the way I approach drawing lines in this setup too. Also, it's a lot faster when you don't use a ruler. One of my favorite ways to decorate in any kind of journal theme is to put something down first that acts kind of like an anchor, something that fills the space or fills part of the space, and then making sure every other sticker or piece of washi tape or whatever it is touching that anchor piece in some way. That's what I'm doing with these columns on the left and right side of the journal here, so I'm using the pink glittery paper, which has stuck to itself, as my anchor down the left and right sides, and then hooking all of my other decorations somewhere onto those. Our calendar spread is all finished now, so it's time to turn the page and get to work on the next spread, which is all about mindfulness. We won't have as much room here to play with decoration on the page, likewise with most of the other functional pages moving through the rest of the theme, so I'm adding some extra colour in with what we call in the community a second line highlight, which is when you use a light coloured marker to add a highlight to every second line, which differentiates the area from the rest of the page and shows where you're supposed to be doing your planning. It's a very quick and effective way to add some colour and some texture and some vibrancy to a page without having to add extra decoration at all. I love the way that a second line highlight kind of walks the line between decoration and function. It really serves both purposes. On the left page, I have sections for manifesting, which is just what I'm calling the goal setting section for this journal. I thought it was much more magical than just writing goals at the top of the page. And enjoying, which is a section for kind of taking stock of what you're into at any given time. So throughout the month, if you're finding that you're really into certain podcasts, or you're really enjoying a certain food, you've been listening to a certain band all the time, or you found a new favorite book or TV show or video game, whatever it is, you just write down the things that you're enjoying over the course of November in that space. And it's so much fun to look back on in the future when many years have passed and you don't always remember what you were into at certain times. I love coming back to these kind of sections in my journal. And on the right side of this spread, we have a gratitude log, which is of course a really nice mindfulness practice to have. Every day you look for one thing to be grateful for and you write it down in a log like this. If you're someone who has trouble staying present in a moment, if you're always kind of thinking about the past or the future and not looking at what's going on around you, a gratitude log can be a really good way to train your brain to pay attention right now. So you'll go through your day thinking, where is my moment of gratitude today? What am I going to write in my gratitude log tonight? I don't have a lot of room left over, but I do have just enough to squeeze in some washi tape, and I'm so lucky I have lots of adorable tiny stickers that I can use to fill in little spaces like the gaps next to my titles here. You know what's really magical when it comes to tiny stickers is a pair of these sticker tweezers. I especially find the ones with the curved pointy tips really useful for peeling up tiny stickers, placing them in such a way that you can kind of see what's going on. Sometimes when you're using just your fingers, your whole hand is in the way and you can't really see where you're placing things. And if you like precision like I do, it can be really helpful to have some sticker tweezers so you can really see everything that's going on. Since I used my lettuce stamps on the cover spread as part of the quote, I wanted to make sure I'm using them in other places throughout the setup too, otherwise they're going to feel a little bit out of place on the cover spread if they don't appear anywhere else. That's how you get a theme, is you repeat the same things again and again. Since the gratitude log has a space for every day of the month, I thought just adding the initial and the number for each day of November would be a good way to get that representation in here without using up too much of the actual gratitude log space. I tried to stamp it really efficiently too, so every time I would need a T, I would just use it all in those places at once, and that was a little bit of a brain teaser. I will admit that took some thinking on my part. All we need now is some tiny sparkle stickers to fill in some tiny little gaps, and we can turn the page and move on to our next spread. This one is for trackers, and there will be two different kinds of tracker across this spread. On the left page we'll have a habit tracker, and on the right page we'll have a mood tracker. Habit trackers are for those little things that you've been meaning to implement into your everyday, but haven't quite been able to make it happen yet. If you're writing down when you're doing your habit, when you're completing it every time, sometimes seeing them all in a list in that kind of don't break the chain method can be motivating enough in itself to make you continue to do the thing. I think everyone's Snapchat and Duolingo streaks are proof enough of that. I actually have streaks on neither of those apps. I don't have those apps, but you get what I'm saying. Since this journal is not actually for me, when I'm setting it up, sometimes it's a little bit tricky to work out what to include and how much of things to include. Bullet journals are typically very personal because they're usually set up by the person who actually uses the journal, so they have a much better idea of what they need than maybe me over here in a different country does. But I love the challenge of trying to work out a journal that would be universally usable, so anyone could use it regardless of their employment or student status or their artistic skill. Whatever it is, I like the idea that possibly this journal could be used by anyone. So when it comes to the habit tracker, I've settled on space to track 6 habits because that's what I find is pretty useful for me. I know there are folks out there who like to track a lot more habits than that, and there are some who maybe would track less. but I think 6 is a pretty good sweet spot, so that's where I've landed, and I've given them space to track 6 habits all the way through this journal, so it's not just kind of in July and then in August, oh, no habit tracker. I've kept the spreads consistent throughout the entire journal. I've just set them up in a way that looks a little bit different each time. Now this mood tracker, I actually stumped myself on this one because I thought I definitely want a little teacup mood tracker that the winner of the journal can colour in a teacup every day in a colour that corresponds to their mood. And at the time I'd been doing a lot of stamp-based mood trackers, but I was going, I don't have any teacup stamps. So I was asking my friends, do you have teacup stamps that I could borrow? I was looking on Amazon to see if I could get one delivered quickly because I was getting down to the wire of when I needed to mail this journal off at the time I was setting this one up. And then I remembered I have a Cricut. So I ended up printing and cutting the mood tracker here, all of these cute little teacups, on some sticker paper, and then just sticking that in the journal, and it was the easiest mood tracker. It came together so quickly. I've added a little space for a key up the top there so the winner of the journal can assign whatever moods and whatever colours to those moods that they like. And at the end of the month, with a teacup coloured in every day, even if you've had a really terrible month, you've still got a really cute page in your journal. Mood trackers can also be really useful for seeing if changes to your lifestyle affect the way that you operate day to day. Things like new medications or new routines, they can be a really helpful way to just see how you're going and check in with yourself. We're on to our next spread here, which is a meal planner and shopping list, and I actually ended up implementing this into my own journal as well after watching myself set it up over and over again while editing the mystery journal videos over the course of the last several months. It made me think every time I saw it, I could really use one of those. The way I've been doing the meal planner in the mystery journal is to set it up essentially as a calendar, although maybe a calendar that is more horizontally oriented than vertically, and making sure each of the days within that calendar has 4 dot grid spaces tall. So if you're someone who really needs to plan out every meal in advance, and maybe you're someone who gets bored by eating the same thing over and over again, there's space to track a breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snack for every single day. I've set it up a bit differently in my own journal because I'm the kind of person who can eat the same meal over and over for a while and not get too bored. So I've kind of set mine up as 3 rotating weeks. In week 1, I have these meals, in week 2, I have those meals, in week 3, I have different meals, and I have a separate shopping list for each one. I think both systems are pretty cool, and I've seen other ways to attack a meal planner in a bullet journal as well online, so there's lots of inspiration out there. I'm bringing my stamps back in here for consistency to add the initial for each day of the week on the calendar, and whenever I use my markers with my stamps like this, which is most of the time when I use stamps, I get questions about what kinds of markers work best. Honestly, I think you can use any kind of brush tip marker. I'm using the black Tombow Fudenosuke specifically in this video, but I've used brush tip paint markers. I've used the Tombow dual brush pens for this purpose before. As long as your stamp is pretty clean, you can get away with just about any water-based marker, and I think the brush tip makes it a lot easier. I so prefer using brush tip markers with my stamps because then I have a much broader array of colors available to me. I don't have to buy ink pads in every color of the rainbow. It's a lot less messy to just color in the surface of the stamp with your marker and place it straight on the page. You don't end up with ink all over your fingers, and you also don't end up with ink all over the parts of the stamp where the ink is not supposed to go. You know how sometimes you get those marks from the corners of the stamp because when you added the ink, it pushed down too far into the ink pad and the ink got in places it's not meant to be? Not an issue when you're using your markers to color in your stamps and then getting them down on the page. It does take a little bit longer, but I honestly think the payoff is worth it. I do find that silicone clear stamps don't work as well with the markers. Some paint markers still seem to go okay on those, but for the best results, I find that woodblock stamps are the way to go with your markers. And of course, the size of the stamp plays into it a little bit too, because if you're working with a really big stamp, by the time you've colored in the second half of the stamp, the first half might already be dry and then not transfer so well, so your mileage may vary, but with little stamps, absolutely, they work so well. We're on to 2 more functional pages here before we have a spare spread, and then we get into our weeklies. Starting on the left page here with what is probably the driest and least exciting page of the entire setup, and that is a spending log. It is exactly what it sounds like, a place to log spending. I'm a big believer in financial literacy, and a really good way to get started on that if you're not sure is to just write down where all of your money goes for a month or 3 months and look back at it and see where you're overspending versus where you could maybe be cutting back, where you're saving really well, that kind of thing. All of the mystery journals I've sent out into the world so far have had a cash flow tracker at the very beginning, and this spending log relates back to that. It's actually just one table, and I've stacked it next to itself to save some space. So there are 3 columns in the table. They are for item, category, and cost. And for everything that you buy, or even if it's just the bigger purchases that you want to keep track of, you write down what the item was, which category you'd put it into. They can be whatever you feel is the best fit for you, but I have categories for my own that are along the lines of living expenses and business expenses and things to do with my pets and my car and stuff like that. Back at the beginning of the journal, there's a space to set a budget for the month. So the idea is that you can use the spending log to keep track of your actual spending, tally things up by category, and at the end of the month compare it to your budget and see how things have gone. Then on the right side, we have a page that is for memories, partly just to balance things out so that I have the right number of pages before we move into other things, and partly because it's really nice to have a space to keep track of your memories. I've left this one pretty open-ended, so the winner of the journal can use it to add photos or junk journal elements or just write about their memories for the month. And this is another one of those pages that becomes more and more valuable as time passes, because you get to have a little snapshot into who you were when you wrote or stuck these things in. In a similar vein, our next spread is just a spare spread, because this journal's not for me and I don't know what the winner of the journal will really actually need. So if I've missed anything, this is kind of a baked-in insurance plan to make sure that they can still have everything they need on these pages. I like to decorate these ones kind of minimally so that there's still lots of room left over to work with, and if the winner of the journal doesn't have anything to put here, I always make sure I send along some extra stuff from each theme so that they can just have a fun time playing with the extra stickers and tape, or they can use it as overflow from the memories page before this. This can be a space for more memories or more junk journaling, or they can add a different quote if they'd like. If the one on the cover spread isn't quite resonating with them right now and they need to have something else going on, this is the space to do it. Our spare spread is complete, so it's time to move on to the very first of our weekly spreads. In my own bullet journal, my weeklies are my favorites because they're where I spend all of my time. The rest of the spreads in my own journal I always use them, but they're more fleeting. They're something that I will use once or twice throughout the month, maybe once a week. The weekly spread is always open on my desk and I am using it every day. When I'm setting up the weeklies in the mystery journal, I like to try to vary them so that each one is a little bit different. From one month to the next, I might use the same layouts, but I always like to give the winner of the journal a bit of a range to work with, partly so they can use it as kind of a sampler taster pack and work out what kind of weeklies they like, if they do indeed like weeklies. I hope they like weeklies, I'm giving them a lot. But also so that the journal doesn't get boring. A big part of the appeal for me of bullet journaling is the ability to change things up and move them around. Oh no, I just put that S9, the Sunday the 9th, too low. That's okay, I'm going to cover it up. I have always been a stationery girly. I have always looked forward to getting my new diary at the end of the year and being really excited to fill it out for the year ahead. And then being really on top of it for the first 2 weeks of January and then never touching the thing again, completely forgetting about it. Until I discovered bullet journaling in about September of 2017, and I have not missed a single month in my own journals ever since. I have used all of them. Some of them I've used more than others. Absolutely, there are months when I have been a little bit slumpier than others. But it's the flexibility to pivot and to change and to decorate or not decorate. It's the combination of organization tool and artistic expression that keeps me coming back to my bullet journal over and over, year after year. So the last thing I want for the winner of one of my journals is for them to get bored seeing the same weekly spread over and over, the way I used to do with the pre-printed journals that I would buy from Kiki K. The flexibility of changing up the layouts across the weeklies is something that works really well for me, so I'm hoping that it translates to the winner of the journal as well and that they have a good time using a different weekly every week. This one is a vertical weekly. This one I've divided the page into 3 columns on each side, so 6 columns in total across the spread. Unfortunately, weeks don't have an even number of days, so I have split the last column into 2. So we've got Saturday and Sunday. I don't like to have a weekend column. I worked a job that required me to have different things going on weekend days for a really long time, so I don't like to kind of limit people with that in case that's not helpful for them. So Saturday and Sunday always get their own separate spaces. Very, very occasionally I'll combine them into weekend, but most of the time I try not to. This weekly also has some space along the top for decoration, which always makes me really happy, and I'm just lining the bottom of the spread with some washi tape. Weekly number 1 is down. Let's turn the page and move on to weekly spread number 2. I love this weekly at the moment. It gives you lots of space for every single day of planning, but it also gives you heaps of room left over to add decoration if you want to. The weekly spaces are squares that are set up in kind of a ring, almost a grid, except you leave the middle one blank and you put something cute there. And then you have this whole strip on the left side that you can use to make kind of a dashboard if you'd like to, or if you're like me and you love your decoration, just put some more pretty stuff there. I'm bringing back the letter stamps for this one to keep that consistency going, and also because my italic calligraphy would be way too big for these boxes, and then we can get into adding some decoration. I've definitely been trying to pace myself throughout this setup. I didn't want to use all of my stationery right at the start and be left with nothing by the end, but I do still have some really cute stickers, so I've rationed things pretty well. We've still got 2 more weekly spreads after this one though, so I've got to make sure I can make it stretch. If you reach a point like this and you think things are looking a little bit too bare, I love to just add a little stripe of colour through a heading. It does so much to fill in some space without you having to really do very much at all. We had a vertical weekly for our first one, and we had a box weekly, some squares for the previous, so this time let's set up a horizontal weekly. I love a horizontal weekly for the aesthetic, but I find it a little bit trickier to use because I usually have pretty extensive to-do lists from one day to the next. I do find them really easy to decorate though, especially when you have horizontally oriented washi tapes like this. You can really just add a strip of them along the top and bottom. Wider washi tapes are great, you only have to use one. If you have thinner ones like this, you can stack them up like this. And your end result is something I like to call the letterbox. This is one of my go-to decoration styles, and I made a video, a little cheat sheet kind of video about these recently, where I gave away all of my secrets in the go-to styles that I decorate my pages with. So if you're keen to check that out, I will put a link down in the description to that video. Once you know what those 3 styles are, you'll start seeing them everywhere. I went back to my italic calligraphy pen for the lettering for this one because I had enough space to do so. Just in case you're curious, the calligraphy marker I'm using in this one is a Kuretake Zig pen. It's actually got 2 tips, so the one I'm using is the 2mm broad nib and the other side is 5mm, so you can only imagine how big you need to write with a 5mm pen if this is the size I need to do with the 2mm. And I actually received this pen as part of the italic calligraphy course that I took. They were recommended by my teacher, so I trust her implicitly with that one. one last weekly spread left to set up for this video, and we're going back to a vertical style, but a very different way to arrange them on the page. If you can see the pencil marks on the page, you might be able to tell that I have drawn boxes for where each of my weekly planning spaces will go for this setup, and of course you could just draw your boxes around these spaces if you preferred that look, and sometimes I do prefer that look, but for this one I'm going with my second line highlight because that's going to give me a lot of colour on the page, some nice movement as well, without me having to do as much decoration as I would have if I'd just drawn the boxes. For this one, we've divided the page in two sections horizontally, and along the top we've got the vertical spaces for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday. Down the bottom we've got Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and an extra section for notes. You could have these all stacked on top of each other if you liked. You could have them center oriented so that you've got them more evenly spaced over the binding. You could have them all to the left side or all to the right, but I decided to stagger mine so that when I add my decoration, the page will still feel quite symmetrical and balanced. I feel like my desk at the beginning of this video was quite chaotic with all of the washi tapes and sticker sheets and bits and pieces, and you can really see how there are not so many left at this point, so I was really rationing to get to here, but now that we're here, I think I've got plenty of stuff to still go around. For purposes of this spread though, I'm going to start with my larger pieces and work my way to the smaller ones. Now that I can see exactly how many stickers I have left over with all of my spreads set up, I can go back through some pages and redistribute some of the stickers that I still have, because you can always go back and keep adding things. I did pop some leftover bits and pieces into a reusable sticker book that went along with the journal to its winner, mostly because it's not very nice to be gifted a mostly used up sticker sheet, like it doesn't look very good, so I always like to consolidate. But I'm so happy with how much of my stash I managed to use up in this witch's tea party theme. And now that it's finished, we can take a full flip through from start to finish. I love that this theme walks the line of being mystical and whimsical, but also so adorable. And I love that I got to include things from 2 Australian stationery brands in here because this journal ended up in the US. I hope that if any of the stationery in this video caught your eye, you could find it in the description, and I hope that you've had a wonderful time at this witch's tea party with me. I've only got one more theme in this journal to share with you, and then we'll be moving on to the next one. And right now, only the fates know where that journal will end up, so definitely stay tuned if you're keen to enter the giveaway for the next mystery journal. I've actually already started work on it, and I think it's going to be so pretty. I'll be sharing some sneak previews of it on my vlog series, which is also on this channel, so make sure you stay tuned if you want to see a little bit behind the scenes before the official big reveal. Thank you so much for planning with me. I hope that you have a beautiful November. May your teacup never empty and your creativity always overflow. Just in case you'd like to keep planning with me, here is a link to a playlist of all of my mystery journal videos so far this year, as well as a video the YouTube algorithm witches have chosen just for you.